Hello everyone, my name is Vladimir Kazarinov and this is a vlog about Russia. So in today's video I would like to talk about inflation, maybe some boring subject, but something I think this is important to talk about. Inflation in commonly and in Russia. Speaking of inflation, if you are quite adult enough, so if you are on your own financially, if you work, if you make some money, did you notice these things, this really inconvenient phenomena that prices always go up? So, you probably know what I mean. So, they always slowly but surely, sometimes faster, not slow, they always go up. So everything becomes more and more expensive and more expensive and even more expensive. You know what I mean, probably. No matter the country where you live, I think it's more or less same as common principle. So you keep in mind like the certain price of some goods you used to buy, or food, on clothes, of utilities and all these things, and from time to time they begin more expensive. So you go to your same local grocery store and you figure out that this loaf of bread costs a little more than you event was before. So this your internet provider sends you a message that it will be a little bit more expensive than was the previous month, and all these things. So you realize that the amount of money you make is not enough to keep usually your standard, your lifestyle, your level of consumption to live the way you used to live. So you begin to react somehow on this situation. So you come to if you're an employee, you come to your boss, to your employer, and say, look, I'd like to talk about my salary. I want to make more money. I want a bit bigger salary. So your boss like, all right, let's discuss. Let's make your salary a bit bigger. So if you are a freelancer, so you and your ordinary client calls to you for the same service which you provided him before, and you, with maybe a little sorrow, you answer him, you reply to him like, look, it's now it's a little bit more expensive than it was before. If you're a business, if you run your business, so you have to up prices on your final good, your final services which you provide, which you sell, which you manufacture, because your employees push on you, so they ask for more money. So this is how inflation works. So prices go up and incomes go up, and nobody just because of this becomes more wealthy. So it's like like an escalator, so which slowly but surely always go down. So for you to keep same level of living, you have to always move with a slow speed maybe, but you have to always move forward just to keep your usually your standard lifestyle. That's how it works. And if you'd like to not just keep your ordinary level of living, level of consumption, you need to move even more faster. You kind of need to beat inflation, so you need to make more money when inflation goes. So you need to make more money above inflation. So if, for example, if inflation in your country for the previous year was 10%, you need to make more than 10% in terms of your income to become really more wealthy, to become really in terms of purchasing power of your income. But if inflation is really high, so let's say you doubled your income for the previous year, my congratulations. But let's say the inflation for the previous year in your country was 100%, which is really high. So I'm sorry, you didn't make more money. You actually keep the same level of consumption, because in terms of purchasing power, you made the same amount of money. So that's how it works. Unfortunately, that's really not convenient, but it is what it is. So speaking of inflation, of reasons of inflation, I'd like to give a little example of possible reasons of inflation, why it takes place. If you're quite familiar with this, if you know how inflation works, the reason of inflation, why it always takes place, like what the hell is going on, you can just skip this part of the video. I'll mark this, so my congratulations. But all right, let's let me give you a really simple, really primitive example of how inflation might work. Let's say we have a really primitive imaginary economy which produces all the apples, just one type of customer good apples, same sort, same shape, perfect round apples. So, and the productivity economy is like it can produce 100 of apples per year. Really small, really primitive economy, imaginary economy. There's no such economy in the real world, of course. So the central bank, to cover these amount of apples, this domestic product which economy makes, issued 100 of coins. So we have economy which produces 100 of apples, and there are 100 of coins in entire economy. So in this situation, the price of one apple will be 1 coin. So an apple, a coin, really convenient, really easy, really primitive at the same time. All right, but speaking of inflation, of possible reasons, economies are not stable. They always grow up. Sometimes they slow down, but mostly they always grow up. So the farmers publish forecasts, their expectations that the next year they'd like to increase the productivity of their apple trees, of their farms, and they expect a harvest of 120 apples. Not so bad. So the central bank, to react on this situation, decided to issue plus 20 apples to cover this additional domestic product, to cover this additional 20 apples, so to reach its goal, stable prices, so that the apple would be once again 1 coin, which would be really convenient. All right, but for some reasons, farmers miscalculated. Other reasons, the climate was not so great. The harvest, as a result, was not so great. So the economy, the harvest was 110 apples. But central bank already issued 20 more coins. So we have situation when we have 110 apples and 120 coins, some like this. So in this situation, if we have 120 coins and 110 apples, which means that one apple would cost 1 coin and 9 sub coins, whatever the name of it, like cent in the United States, like kopek in Russia, and all these things, which actually means the inflation of 9 and something %, which is not so convenient, but it is what it is. But at the same time, I'd like to mention that the productivity of economy was 10%, so the economy grown up in 10%, which is just great. So we have situation with economical growth of 10% and inflation of 9%. Typical situation. So that's possible, really primitive illustrations of how inflation might work. So speaking of inconvenience of inflation, actually it was a country, it existed where it was for a long period of time, for decades, when it was zero inflation, so when it was no inflation. So if you have no clues about this country, let me just answer. The country was called the Soviet Union, socialistic country where the communism and socialism was being built, not successfully, but still. So in this country, which was fully controlled by government, almost all the economy was fully controlled by the government. Government controlled prices, and so the prices were same. They can vary from one region to another region, from one city to another city, but in this certain city they were fixed for a lot of period of time, for several years, for a decade and more than a decade. So people really was able to keep in mind all the prices of all the customers, goods and services which we had to buy. And also the choice of these certain goods was really low, really humble. Let's say like we had two types of bread, like maybe kind of choice, you know, two types of ice cream, sometimes one type of ice cream, two is kind of choice. So like two types of cheese, maybe one type of cheese, maybe no cheese at all. So that was really not so productive compared to current situation, of course. Economy with zero inflation. It was really convenient, but actually, you know, what actually took place. The productivity of Soviet Union's economy from year to year became less and less productive. So people have less and less choice. Economy from time to time faces a deficit of really a lot of customers, goods and services, and you know, these empty shelves. Or let me show you some illustrations. Yes, like this is typical situations for a late Soviet Union. Like it was nothing, almost nothing in you know, shop. So that's actually took place in Soviet Union. It was really sad times. It was late 18th Soviet Union ruined in 1991. But people still were occupied in their jobs. They did something and they were paid with money, which government issues. So the thing was that the people have a lot of more and more money in their pockets, in their bank accounts, but they were unable to buy a lot because of this amount of money. So actually in economy this is called hidden inflation. So like there is no much inflation, there is no actual inflation at this current moment, but the inflation hiddenly like accumulated in a hidden you know, position. So some like this. So when Soviet Union ruined in 1991 and new government announced liberalization of prices and economy, no surprising that inflation in this country became really galloping, became really super huge. So a little example, in the very first year of new post-Soviet Russia, 1992, inflation became more than 2,500%. So in the year of 1992, which means that just for 1 year, prices in this country grow up in 25 times. So this actually took place 25 times for just one single year. This is not a world record. The history of economy faced situations of even more galloping, more high inflation, but it was really high, it was really inconvenient. But slowly but surely the situation in this country became to stabilize, and in the next year, so 1993, inflation in this country became 894, let's say roughly 840%. So which means that prices moved up in the year of 1993 in 8.4 times, which was still not much convenient. But it was much better than even in the previous year. And now let me give you just a really brief history of inflation in this country, divided by decades, really fast, really with some of my comments. In the next year, in the next decade, in the continuation of the very first decade of existence of Soviet Union, as you could see, the inflation slowly but surely began to slow down from 200% to 100 and something to even 20 and even 11%. It grew up in the year of 1998. We had inflation in 84 and something percent, which was not so convenient. This was a reaction of the very first financial crisis which took place in this year. So Russian government announced a default on their bonds. So it was the very first, the very first reaction of liberal reforms, of some miscalculations of governments, of really new government which had no previous experience. So we had economical crisis in the year of 1998. But moving next in the next decade, so as you could see, inflation began more and more normal. So from 20% it slowed down up to 9% in the year of 26 and rose up a little in the actually more than a little in the year of 28 as a reaction of the world finance crisis, which affected all the globe, all the world, including Russia. So this is what took place. So in the next decade, inflation kept on slowing down. So from 8 and something it slowed down to 2.5%. Really nice. Except the years of 2014 and 2015, when inflation, as you could see, rose up a little bit. More than a little bit, as a reaction of oil prices decline. Russian economy was and still quite much depends on oil prices, but lately inflation stabilized. So also I'd like to mention that in the year of 2015, Russian Central Bank announced its new policy that it has aimed to inflation to keep it above 4% a year. I think this is a good aim for inflation, and as you can see, mostly in the end of this decade, it was mostly like this. So inflation was like 2.5, 4.5, 3.5. So it was mostly nice. So inflation was more or less convenient. 4% is not much. You could plan under this inflation. You could budget, which I personally like. You can put in your plan certain numbers adjusted by inflation. So you take these current numbers and you add some inflation for the next year, and you can plan for the next year and for the year after the next, which is really convenient. But in the next decade, so we are going now to the current situation. We had several really messy events. So in the year of 2020, not only Russia but all the world had the COVID pandemic. So as a reaction of this, in the next year, inflation rose up at 8 and something percent, and in the next year, 2022, it started Russian-Ukrainian military conflict, and as a reaction of this, the inflation rose up at almost 12%, which was really not much convenient. And so in the previous year, we are now getting back to this current situation. We had inflation of 7 and 4%, which is still a bit higher than the aim of Central Bank of Russia, 4%, but it's getting closer and closer. And this current forecast of Central Bank of Russia for this ongoing year, 2024, is that inflation will normalize, and at this certain year will be, this is forecast, will come to like 4, maybe 4.5%. To be honest, I consider in my more realistic situation, I expect inflation in this year of let's say 5, maybe 5.5%, which is really slow, which is really more or less nice, almost normal, almost 4%. So let's see what this is going to be, how this is going to be for the end of this year. Finishing my review of inflation in Russia, I'd like to mention that the country, the economy, started with really a normal, really huge, really galloping, really absolutely shocking inflation of 2,500% in the year 1992, came to modest inflation of like, let's say 4, 5, maybe 5.5%, which is really nice, which is not so bad. So, and I hope this will take place in expected future. So, some like this. So by this, I'm finishing this video, this conversation about the inflation. Hope it was not boring, the subject itself. I realize inflation is a bit boring thing. Well, thanks for watching and see you in next videos.